The security camera caught someone inside my house seconds before I realized the black car had been watching me for days. I work overnight shifts at a warehouse, so my life runs backwards compared to everyone else's. While the rest of the neighborhood sleeps, I'm driving home at 4 in the morning under dead street lights and empty roads. Even on my days off, I stay on the same schedule, awake all night, asleep during the day. At the time, I thought that routine made me safer. Now I realize it only made me predictable. A few months ago, I got off work around 4 a.m. and pulled into my neighborhood 15 minutes later. The streets were silent. No headlights, no movement, nothing. But as I turned toward my driveway, I saw a car parked directly beside my house. An old black sedan. Its windows were so heavily tinted they looked painted over. No lights, no engine noise, just sitting there like it had been waiting for me. I slowed down as I passed it, trying to look inside, but the darkness behind those windows felt almost unnatural. I pulled into my garage and stared at the car one last time before heading inside. The weird thing was there was absolutely no reason for anyone to park there. The houses in my neighborhood are spaced far apart, and there's always plenty of room along the road. Whoever owned that car could have parked literally anywhere else. Instead, they chose the one spot directly beside my driveway. At first, I convinced myself it was harmless. Maybe someone visiting a neighbor. Maybe a late-night party. I checked through the window about an hour later before going to bed. The car was gone. That should have been the end of it. But the next night, after another exhausting shift, I turned onto my street and felt my stomach instantly tighten. The black sedan was back. Same spot. Same dead headlights. Same blacked out windows. This time I parked and stayed in the garage for a moment, gripping the steering wheel while staring at it through the windshield. Something about it felt wrong now, like it wasn't random anymore. I finally stepped outside and slowly walked toward the end of my driveway. The cold night air felt unnaturally still. No crickets, no wind, nothing. Then I saw movement inside the car. Just for a split second, a shape shifted behind the tinted glass. I froze immediately. Maybe it was a reflection. Maybe my exhausted brain was imagining things. But every instinct in my body screamed that someone was in there watching me. I stopped about 10 feet away, too nervous to get any closer. I couldn't see a face. Couldn't see anything at all. Before going back inside, I took a picture of the license plate with my phone. I remember laughing nervously to myself, thinking I was probably overreacting. I wasn't. An hour later, the car disappeared again. The following evening was my night off. I woke up after sunset and decided to take my usual walk around the neighborhood. Before leaving, I checked outside. No black sedan. I walked for nearly an hour through quiet streets and empty sidewalks. Maybe 2 parked cars the entire time. But when I came back, the sedan was there again, right beside my driveway. My chest tightened so hard it hurt. At that point, curiosity overpowered fear. I walked straight up to the driver's side window, pressed my hands against the glass to block the reflection, and finally looked inside. The car was empty. No driver. No passenger. No trash. No personal belongings. Nothing. It looked abandoned. And somehow that was worse. I hurried back inside my house, suddenly feeling exposed, like someone could still be watching me from somewhere nearby. The first thing I grabbed was my phone from the charger beside my bed. That's when I noticed the notification. Motion detected. From my security camera system. I immediately opened the app. I had 1 camera facing my front door and 3 more inside the house covering the main rooms. The alert didn't specify which camera had triggered. There was a saved 60-second clip. I hit play. For almost the entire video, nothing happened. The house sat completely silent in the pale glow of the night vision camera. No movement, no sound. I actually started relaxing, thinking the system had glitched. Then, in the final 5 seconds, something moved across the bottom of the frame. Fast. Too fast. I paused the video and replayed it frame by frame. A person. Only part of their head and shoulder appeared for less than a second, but it was enough to make my blood run cold. Because whoever it was, they weren't outside my house. They were already inside. The moment I realized the figure on the camera was inside my bedroom, my hands went completely numb. The phone nearly slipped from my grip. A cold pressure spread through my chest as I slowly lifted my eyes from the screen and looked around the dark room I was standing in. Every corner suddenly felt alive. Every shadow looked wrong. The silence inside the house became unbearable. The kind of silence so heavy you can hear your own heartbeat pounding in your ears like distant war drums. And then the terrifying truth hit me. Someone had been inside my house while I was gone. Maybe they were still there. Maybe they were watching me right now. My breathing became shallow as panic flooded my mind. I turned slowly in circles, scanning the bedroom, the closet, the hallway outside the door. My thoughts were spiraling out of control. The black sedan outside, the surveillance, the motion alert. It all connected at once like pieces of some horrifying operation planned around me for weeks. I knew I had to get out. Immediately, I backed toward the bedroom doorway as quietly as I could. The moment I stepped into the hallway, I heard movement behind me. Fast movement, a sudden shuffle from inside the room. Then heavy footsteps exploded down the hallway directly toward me. Whoever it was had been hiding only feet away. Adrenaline detonated through my body. I sprinted for the stairs while the footsteps thundered behind me, getting closer every second. I could hear them charging after me through the darkness of my own house. 10 feet, maybe less. I practically threw myself down the stairs and slammed into the front door, nearly ripping it open in panic before bolting outside into the storm-dark woods beside my property. I never looked back. I didn't want to see what was chasing me. Branches whipped against my face as I ran blindly through the trees. Wet leaves cracked beneath my shoes while my lungs burned for air. For several horrifying moments, I could still hear footsteps somewhere behind me moving through the darkness. Then suddenly, nothing. Only the sound of my own footsteps remained. I kept running until the house disappeared behind the trees. Shaking uncontrollably, I finally called 911. When police arrived, the black sedan was gone. But thankfully, I still had the picture of the license plate I'd taken the night before. 3 hours later, they found him, a man in his mid-20s. According to the officers, he looked completely unhinged, pale, exhausted, and mentally unstable. When they showed me his mugshot later, I genuinely felt sick. If I had turned around and seen that face chasing me through my hallway, I honestly think I would have frozen in terror. The most disturbing part? He had no real connection to me, no clear motive. He had simply chosen me. Police found dozens of photos of my house on his phone. Some were taken from deep within the trees across the street. Others showed me sitting inside my living room at night, completely unaware someone was watching through the windows. There were even notes documenting my schedule. When I left for work, when I came home, when my lights turned off. He had been tracking me for over 2 weeks like some kind of military surveillance target. And somehow, we still don't know how he got inside the house without triggering the cameras. That's the part that still destroys my sleep sometimes. He knew exactly where the cameras were positioned. He avoided every single one except for that tiny accidental movement caught at the bottom corner of the bedroom camera. Which means there's no way of knowing if that was truly the first time he'd broken in. For all I know, he could have been inside that house before, standing silently in the darkness while I slept only feet away. Thankfully, he won't be free for a very long time. But even now, years later, there are nights when I wake up and immediately look toward the corners of my room before turning on the light. Because once you realize someone has secretly been watching your life, you never fully feel alone again. And strangely enough, that wasn't even the creepiest experience I've had working nights. For years earlier, during one of the worst storms I'd ever driven through, I was working as an Uber driver. Nights like that were usually dead. Almost nobody wanted to leave their homes while thunder shook the town and rain hammered the streets like artillery fire. Still, I stayed out driving. Even if I only got a few rides, the extra money always felt worth it. Most of the night was painfully slow. I spent hours parked alone in empty parking lots, listening to rain slam against the windshield while watching random videos on my phone. Every now and then I drive around town just to stay awake. Then finally, close to midnight, I got a pickup request. The passenger was over 25 minutes away, and the drop-off point was another 20 minutes beyond that. Normally, I would have ignored a trip that far out, but there were barely any drivers working because of the storm. So I accepted it. As I drove farther from town, civilization slowly disappeared behind me. Streetlights became rare. Houses vanished. Soon it felt like I was driving through complete isolation with only rain and darkness surrounding the road. At some point, I actually forgot I was picking someone up. It felt more like drifting through nowhere. The storm made everything worse. Wind rocked the car, while lightning occasionally illuminated endless fields and thick tree lines stretching into darkness. Finally, after nearly 35 minutes, I arrived at the pickup location. It was the intersection of two empty back roads in the middle of absolutely nowhere. No gas stations, no houses, no lights, nothing except fields, woods, and rain. And no passenger. I sat there staring through the windshield, confused why anyone would request an Uber from a place like this during a storm. After waiting about a minute, I looked down at my phone and messaged them. That's when I noticed movement in my side mirror. Someone was suddenly walking up behind my car. I have no idea where he came from. 1 second the road was empty. The next, a figure emerged from the darkness itself. He opened the back door and climbed inside without saying a word. The man was completely drenched, rainwater dripping onto the seats beneath him. His face looked tense, almost furious, and his eyes had this hollow, disturbed look that immediately put me on edge. "You order the Uber?" I asked carefully. Instead of answering normally, he quietly said my first name. That confirmed he was the right passenger. But something about the way he said it didn't feel right at all. Something about the man sitting behind me felt deeply wrong. Not nervous, not drunk, wrong. He sat directly in the center of the back seat, instead of behind one of the passenger seats like normal people do. Every time I glanced into the rearview mirror, his face was staring straight ahead into mine like he wanted me to know he was watching. And the look in his eyes, it was cold, calculated, like he was thinking through something dangerous. Rain hammered against the windshield so hard it sounded like gunfire rattling across the roof of the car. Lightning flashed across the empty countryside, briefly illuminating endless woods and flooded ditches beside the road before darkness swallowed everything again. I kept trying to convince myself I was overthinking it, but every instinct I had was screaming that this guy was trouble. I wanted badly to ask why he'd been standing alone in the middle of nowhere during a violent storm, but at the same time, I didn't want to provoke him. The atmosphere inside the car already felt tense enough. Still, as we drove deeper into isolated back roads with absolutely no houses or lights anywhere around us, the silence became unbearable. So I finally spoke. "Hey, so what brought you all the way out here tonight? Especially with the storm?" I forced the question out casually, trying to sound relaxed. In the mirror, his eyes immediately shifted away from mine. For a second, it looked like he was about to answer. His mouth even opened slightly. But then he stopped himself. He just stared out the rain-covered window in silence. That silence hit harder than any response could have. It wasn't awkward silence. It was the silence of someone hiding something. From that point on, his behavior changed. He started shifting in his seat more, glancing around the car, checking the mirrors, watching me while pretending not to. Every few seconds, I'd catch him staring directly at the back of my head before quickly looking away. Meanwhile, the storm kept getting worse. The windshield wipers struggled to keep up with the rain, and visibility was terrible. I hated not being able to clearly see what he was doing behind me. Then suddenly he spoke. "Drop me off here." The words came out flat and emotionless. I frowned and glanced at the GPS. There was nothing there. No buildings. Nothing but trees and darkness. "Are you sure?" I started asking. "Drop me off here," he repeated sharply, louder this time. The tone in his voice immediately killed any thought of arguing. Something was seriously wrong, and I wanted absolutely no involvement in whatever this man was planning. I slowed the car and pulled onto the muddy shoulder of the deserted road. For a second, neither of us moved. Then he reached for the door handle. But before opening it, his eyes suddenly locked onto my phone sitting on the center console with the Uber app still open. And I watched something change in his expression. He froze. The realization hit him instantly. The app had his full name, his ride information, a digital trail leading directly back to him. Whatever he planned on doing out there in those woods, suddenly he understood that I could identify him. He slowly pulled his own phone from his pocket and checked something on the screen while thinking hard. And in that moment, I knew exactly what was happening inside his head. He was deciding whether or not to leave me alive. A chill crawled up my spine. Trying not to sound panicked, I quickly spoke. "Hey, don't worry about the ride. I'll cancel on my end so you won't get charged." I hoped the comment would calm him down somehow. Maybe if he thought the ride would disappear from the system, he'd stop worrying about me remembering it. For several long seconds, he just stared at me. His eyes looked empty, dead, like there was no emotion left inside him at all. Finally, without another word, he opened the door and stepped out into the storm. The rain instantly swallowed him. Within seconds, the fog, darkness, and downpour completely erased him from sight, like he had never been there at all. The moment the door shut, I hit the gas and got out of there as fast as possible. I didn't even look in a mirror. Even though I technically had no proof the guy was dangerous, I still reported the encounter to police later that night. Something about him had felt too wrong to ignore. Days passed. Then I got a phone call. A person had gone missing that same night. The last known location connected to them was near the exact stretch of Forest Road where I picked that man up. Police asked me to describe everything that happened. I gave them every detail I could remember: his appearance, his behavior, the location, even the way he kept staring at my phone before leaving. But they never found him, and they never found the missing person either. The storm had destroyed everything. Any footprints, tire tracks, or evidence were likely washed away within hours. To this day, I was the last confirmed person to ever see that man. And honestly, I think there's a very real chance that if I had reacted differently that night, I would have disappeared too. But somehow, that still wasn't the strangest thing to happen to me. A few years later, during early April, I experienced something even more terrifying, and this time it happened in my own house. It had been raining nonstop for days. My job required me to work both indoors and outdoors, so by the end of every shift, I was completely exhausted and soaked through. I finally got off work around 6 p.m. and drove the 30 minutes back home through pounding rain and thick gray fog. My house sat far out in the rural part of town, surrounded mostly by woods and empty land. As I turned into my driveway, something immediately caught my attention. Fresh tire tracks, deep ones. The rain had turned the driveway into mud, and another vehicle had clearly driven all the way up to my house not long before I arrived. At first, I brushed it off. Maybe a delivery truck. Maybe someone turned around after taking the wrong driveway. But when I parked and checked the porch, there were no packages, no mail, nothing. The tracks showed that whoever it was had pulled all the way to the house, stopped, then carefully performed a three-point turn before leaving. That felt strange, but not dangerous. At least not yet. I went inside, changed out of my soaked work clothes, and started throwing together something quick to eat while rain battered the roof overhead. Around 7:30, while sitting in the living room scrolling on my phone, I thought I heard a knock at the front door. Just one knock, soft, barely audible beneath the storm. For a moment, I thought I imagined it. Still, I got up and walked across the house toward the front entrance. The second I opened the door, freezing rain and wind blasted into my face. But nobody was there. My porch was completely empty. I stood there confused, staring out into the darkness while rain poured from the roof around me. The woods beyond the yard swayed violently in the storm, shadows twisting between the trees every time lightning flashed. After a few seconds, I shut the door before the rain soaked the entire entryway. Probably nothing, I told myself. Just the storm. I went back to the couch, turned my attention back to the TV, and tried to relax. But deep down, something already felt wrong. For the next hour, nothing else happened. At least, that's what I wanted to believe. The storm outside continued pounding against the house like waves crashing into a bunker while I sat on the couch, trying to lose myself in the TV and my phone. Eventually, I got up to use the bathroom. That's when I noticed it. A dark smear on the floor behind the couch. At first glance, it looked like mud, just a small mark. But against the bright white tile floor, it stood out immediately. My stomach tightened. I stared at it for several seconds, trying to process how it got there. I never wore shoes inside the house, especially not muddy ones after walking through heavy rain. And the strangest part was that I somehow hadn't noticed it earlier, even though it was directly behind the couch where I'd been sitting all night. I grabbed a rag from the kitchen and wiped it away, but the second the dirt smeared across the cloth, an awful feeling settled deep into my chest. Something felt wrong. Not obvious, not explainable, just wrong. I tried convincing myself it was nothing. Maybe I accidentally tracked it in earlier without noticing. Maybe it had fallen from a bag or jacket. My brain kept forcing logical explanations into place. But another thought quietly kept creeping back in. What if it wasn't mine? The idea sounded ridiculous. Yet once it entered my head, I couldn't get rid of it. I used the bathroom and returned to the couch. But from that moment on, the atmosphere inside the house completely changed. The living room suddenly felt enormous and exposed. The way the couch faced the TV meant the entire downstairs sat behind me in darkness. And I hated it. Every few seconds, I caught myself glancing over my shoulder. The feeling was overwhelming. That primal instinct that someone is standing just outside your vision, watching you silently. Like the moment after a horror movie when you turn the lights off and suddenly regret it. The storm wasn't helping either. Wind rattled the windows while shadows shifted across the walls every time lightning flashed outside. Eventually, I became so uncomfortable that I shut the TV off entirely and went upstairs to my bedroom. At least there, my bed was against the wall. Nothing could stand behind me, or at least that's what I told myself. I turned on the small TV in my room and tried to continue my night normally, forcing myself to relax while rain hammered the roof overhead. About 20 minutes passed. Slowly, the fear started fading. Then I heard it, a dull sound outside my bedroom door. Thump. It was quiet, muted, like someone accidentally bumped the wall or took a careful step on the hallway floor. My entire body instantly locked up. I muted the TV and listened. Silence. No movement. No footsteps. Still, the sound had been real. I slowly got out of bed and walked toward the bedroom door, every step making my heart pound harder. I pressed my ear against the wood and held my breath. Nothing. The hallway outside was completely silent. For several long seconds, I stood there trying to gather enough courage to open the door. I kept telling myself I needed to stop acting paranoid and just confirm everything was fine. Finally, I grabbed the handle and pulled the door open. The hallway was empty, dark, still. I stepped out carefully, staring toward the staircase and the spare bedroom at the far end of the hall. That room was mostly unused, just old bookshelves, storage boxes, and a dusty chair in the corner. Something about looking at that doorway made my stomach twist. I started walking toward it. Then suddenly, the TV downstairs exploded on at full volume. I nearly screamed. The sound blasted through the house so suddenly and violently that it felt like an ambush. Bright flashing light erupted from the living room below, flickering wildly against the downstairs walls. My heart slammed against my ribs so hard it physically hurt. Someone was down there. I sprinted down the hallway and practically jumped down the stairs two at a time. The entire first floor was dark except for the glow of the television flashing like emergency lights inside the living room. I turned the corner expecting to see someone standing there, but the room was empty, completely empty. The TV played loudly to nobody. I moved slowly toward it, scanning every inch of the room while adrenaline surged through my body. Every doorway looked threatening now. Every dark corner felt occupied. Finally, I reached behind the TV and shut it off manually. Silence returned instantly, but this time, the silence felt far worse. Because now I knew something wasn't right. All the strange events from the night suddenly connected together in my mind like pieces of an operation unfolding around me. The tire tracks, the knock at the door, the mud on the floor, the noises upstairs, the TV turning on by itself. I rushed into the kitchen and grabbed the largest knife I could find. Looking back now, I probably should have called the police immediately. But in the moment, my brain was focused on survival. Out where I live, police response time could easily take 15 minutes or more. If somebody was really inside the house, that was too long. So I started checking every room myself, one by one, slowly, carefully. The first floor looked normal. No broken furniture, no open doors, no movement, nothing. As I cleared each room without finding anyone, I slowly started convincing myself that maybe it really had all been random coincidences stacked together. Maybe stress and fear had gotten into my head. Still gripping a knife, I quietly made my way back upstairs toward the spare room. The hallway creaked beneath my feet. I reached the door and slowly pushed it open. At first, everything looked exactly the same. Dark bookshelves, old storage boxes, closet door slightly open. Then my eyes landed on something lying on the floor near the closet, and my blood instantly turned cold. It was a remote control for the downstairs TV. I had left it in the living room. Someone had carried it upstairs. My body reacted before my brain even processed it fully. I backed away so fast I nearly fell, then turned and sprinted downstairs, out the front door, and straight into the storm while calling 911 with shaking hands. When police arrived, they confirmed my worst fear. Someone had absolutely been inside the house. They found signs of forced entry at one of the downstairs windows where the lock had been broken from the outside. Investigators believed whoever had likely come earlier that day while I was still at work. The tire tracks I noticed were probably from them pulling into the driveway to check if I was home. When nobody answered the door, they came back later and broke in, which means while I sat downstairs watching TV, they were already inside the house with me, possibly watching me the entire night. That thought still makes my skin crawl years later. Police believe that after I went upstairs to my bedroom, the intruder grabbed the downstairs TV remote and waited silently inside the spare room nearby. Then, just as I started walking toward the room they were hiding in, they turned the TV on downstairs to distract me. And while I ran down to investigate, they slipped past me in the darkness and escaped the house unnoticed. What still terrifies me the most is this. They didn't steal anything. Not money, not electronics, not even my car keys sitting out in the open downstairs. Whoever broke into my house wasn't there to rob me. They were there for something else. And honestly, I think that's 100 times more disturbing. Police searched the entire property that night, but beyond the broken window lock and a few muddy traces near the downstairs hallway, there was almost nothing left behind. No fingerprints clear enough to identify. No missing items. No explanation. Just evidence that someone had quietly moved through my home while I sat completely unaware, only rooms away. Sometimes that thought hits me out of nowhere late at night. I'll be lying in bed and suddenly remember how close I came to opening that spare room door while they were still inside. If the TV downstairs hadn't turned on, I probably would have walked directly into that room with nowhere to run. And judging by the way they manipulated the situation, distracting me, timing everything perfectly, slipping through the house without making noise, this wasn't random panic behavior. They stayed calm the entire time, like they had done something like this before. That realization still follows me years later like a shadow. Even now, whenever I hear an unexplained noise in the house, my mind instantly goes back to that stormy night. Sometimes I still catch myself checking dark hallways twice before turning off the lights. Because once you truly feel what it's like to be hunted inside your own home, you never completely feel safe again. And the worst part? Whoever that person was, they were never caught. So somewhere out there, someone knows the layout of my house, knows my routines, and once stood silently in the dark watching me without me ever realizing it. Hopefully nothing like that ever happens again. But if it does, and I'm still around afterward, maybe I'll update you.